is that?
Kaiser Soze!
Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze.
Soze.
Soze. Kaiser Soze. Kaiser Soze.
For Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze.
Who's Kaiser Soze? Okay, there is no Kaiser Soze.
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 Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze.
And the devil himself.
A spook story, a myth.
I'm telling you, it's Kaiser Soze!
Who is Kaiser Soze?
I think the funniest thing was everyone had a different way to pronounce Kaiser Soze. And we just kept laughing. Guys were saying Kaiser Soso, Kaiser Sosa, Kaiser, Yiza.
We changed the name Kaiser Soze, or Kaiser Sume to Kaiser Soze, because Chris's boss at a law firm was named Kaiser Sume. And Chris went and said, we want to put your name in the script. And he goes, oh, that sounds great. And I'm sure you and your friends will make a really great movie, but I just want to read the script to make sure it won't affect my law practice. So before Chris sent him the script, he read through it, and there's that part where Kaiser Sume killed his whole family. And he thought, so he called me up on a location scout and said, we have to change the name. So I said, all right, well, let's find something. So they found in a Turkish dictionary the word Soze, which is Turkish for talk too much, or verbal, essentially. So, and Kaiser's German for king. And
he's supposed to be Turkish. Some say his father was German. Nobody ever believed he was real.
So it was basically German and Turkish for king, talk too much. And we told that, I called Chaz up and told him we're changing the name Kaiser Sume to Kaiser Soze. And Chaz, who had memorized the whole script with the previous names, said, don't do that. No, why do you, no, don't do that. Because he knew, and sure enough, on the set, you know, you know, nobody could get it.
I remember Gabriel Byrne, he would go around saying Kaiser Sanchez, and someone else would call Sosa or Soze. You know, it's just like, you know, it was one of those things that, you know, when finally we saw the film, everything clicked. And it was really a special moment, you know.
The Usual Suspects is a film that is very deceiving. It tricks you. It plays with your head. It goes in one direction and then quickly turns. It's a maze. The Usual Suspects is a maze of lies, not clues.
Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey were there. They decided in the interrogation scenes, certain moments of Kevin's performance, which obviously wouldn't change from the first time you saw the movie to the second time, because once captured on film, it's very difficult to change your performance. But the exact same performance would have two different readings and reactions from the audience from the first time you saw the movie to the second time.
It's a bit like Rashomon that way. And it's kind of interesting. Except different than Rashomon is it wasn't, you know, we're not showing you different actions, we're using the same material.
The first time you see Kevin Spacey's character, Verbal Kint, in the interrogation room, the camera just sort of comes around and just sort of catches Kevin sitting in the interrogation room. And the first time you see the movie, this is what Kevin's doing. Looks bored out of his mind. Second time you see the movie, knowing that he made up some of the story from the bulletin board, you think you see the same performance this way. You think you see him literally reading shit from the bulletin board. It's the same performance that you swore the first time you saw the movie he looked bored. And that was specifically designed by Bryan and Kevin to do it that way. Try to pick a handful of moments.
If you're perceptive enough, you say, why is the camera moving in on the wall there? Why? For what reason? A camera move is very specific in a film. If a camera pushes in on a character, it's to tell you something very important. If it pushes in on a wall in the middle of a movie, you'd start to say to yourself, what's on that wall? but you forget it.
The more times you see the movie, the more clues you get. But you know, it's one of those movies that gets better and better every time you see it, and you start picking up things. It's so incredibly well crafted that you just go, oh yeah, that's right. You know, you keep going, oh yeah. It's a constant discovery in that movie.
My foot is Kaiser Soze's foot. We shot that scene with the cigarette dropping on the flames in my backyard. The cigarette being dropped. It's John Ottman's hand and producer Ken Koch, and it was him actually dropping the cigarette. Yeah, we had 2 interns actually. They were interns, and one became my personal assistant, and the other one, he had very long hair, and his arms were odd. They couldn't stretch out all the way. He had restriction in his joints, born with it. So he was a very interesting looking guy, and he very much, you know, was excited when we asked him to play young Kaiser Soze.
Singer said, I want you to put on the hat and the coat and the gun, and I want you to shoot him. I said, but him is me. He said, I know him is you, but I want you to shoot you. I said, you want my character to shoot this other character? He said, just put the hat and the coat on and shoot this. I said, but I will be shooting myself. He said, it's important that the audience, for that moment, thinks that that character with the gun and the hat is you. And if you really look closely and you stop it, it is me.
Gabriel had no idea why I was doing this and got very, kind of frustrated with it because it made no sense to him. And I said, just put it on. He had the fedora, he had the long coat, and he had the gun. And he kept saying, why are you doing this? And I said, I might need it. I don't know. Why? But why? I mean, what would you need it for? I don't know why. He goes, well, why are you doing this? And I said, because I'm a big Miller's Crossing fan.
My job was to really take attention off Spacey. That was what I was to do. Say, oh, it's him. I know it's him. While he was being so obviously not Kaiser Soze that he escaped he was the last one that people looked at because attention was drawn away from him.
Gabriel apparently was so convinced that he was in fact Kaiser Soze when he was shooting the movie that he was quite shocked to find out that he wasn't. And he took Brian out into the parking lot and I believe had about a half-hour, what could be called a heated argument about it. So I think that anyone is allowed to have any interpretation they want. If Gabriel wants to be, I believe he can be. I believe no one should deny him that.
And there's also a moment where Chaz has got the coffee mug in his hand. He's taking a sip. And the way that Brian shoots it, it's like a dirty over where you see part of Chaz and you see the coffee cup, but you really see Kevin's Verbal's face. And he literally looks like he's reading the bottom of the cup.
There's other little weird things, like, when Kevin Spacey goes behind the ropes to watch what's happening. I actually had him not go behind the ropes. I had him stop behind the tires, and the camera kept going. So if you ever watch it, he's not really behind the ropes, because he was never behind the ropes, because there was nothing behind the ropes.
One of the hallmarks of Spacey's performance is there's a deadness to him. There's a deadness, and it's very intriguing to watch him as an actor, to see how he portrayed Kaiser Soze while he was the other guy, because it's so subtle that, like for example, in that scene of he comes in, he looks at the camera, his eyes go completely dead, and he turns into.
Hand me the keys, you fucking cocksucker.
There was a coldness and a venom in the way that he said it, that you thought, hold on. When you see him in the next scene and he's like this, you think, where's that guy? Why is this guy now being so humble and so unsure of himself? Where's the guy that looked like that and delivered the line like that?
In a way, that was exactly how one had to approach the performance, which was, on one level he's this, but it's a little. Let me make an analogy that people might be able to understand that was in my head. I do a lot of theater, and You know, most people go and see a play once, and they sit in a certain seat, and then they have a certain memory of that evening. But if you like to go to plays a lot, and I do, and I like sitting in different places, and I like, particularly if it's an actor, an actress that I admire, or a company that I admire, or even a new play that's in previews, I'll go many times. Because when you sit in the mezzanine and you're looking down on a play, you have a certain angle on it that the person sitting in row L in the orchestra doesn't. And from whatever angle you were looking at, you have a different experience. That's similar to the way that I tried to think about how to approach this role. That once the angle changes, the audience is going to have a completely different perception, and as a result, they're going to rewind the film and play it again and realize, oh my God. And what was most interesting about that, from our perspective, was how amazing it is that the truth can be looking you right in the eye, it can be staring at you, and you can miss it.
Because you're stupid, Verbal. Because you're a cripple.
What I want to know is who's the gimp.
You know the whole fucking time.
Brian and I had a lot of conversations prior to filming about how do we make the change? How do we successfully go from a character who has appeared to an audience for 98% of the movie in a certain way, that they've made judgments about that character, that they've made allusions about his strength, that they've maybe felt a certain degree of, oh, what a pathetic little weasel. And then suddenly your perception has changed. And we had some discussions about, do we want it to be cosmetic? Does Verbal come down the stairs of the police station and as he's beginning to walk away, shed his jacket and tousle his hair and get into the car, and you know, maybe a jacket comes out of the car and he puts on a different sports coat, and suddenly he puts on a pair of dark glasses, and suddenly physically he changes. And we had a good, honest discussion about it, and we debated on both sides the pros and cons of that kind of cosmetic change. And we ultimately decided that what would probably be more profound and debilitating for an audience in terms of being able to go, wait a minute, was if absolutely nothing changed but your perception. Literally as if the angle from which you were watching a character completely shifted 380 degrees, and you suddenly saw that person entirely differently, and nothing had changed but the way you viewed it.
After that, my guess is you'll never hear from him again.
There wasn't a whole lot of places where I was able to manipulate the audience in terms of thinking it was someone else other than Spacey, and just had to go on faith that the nuances in his performance weren't going to be over the top for the audience and they weren't going to guess it. But the one moment where we really did intentionally try to push the audience another way and into suspecting Keaton was in the Kuyan interrogation sequence, which I talk about on the DVD, about how that became a montage from a straight interrogation, and using all the imagery from the movie of Keaton and trying to look as evil as he could.
The film came together very well, performances shaped very well. I was very pleased, except the ending didn't quite have the punch. It was too much information, and I was afraid that by the time his foot unfolds and straightens out, people would be like, what? Huh? And it kind of played that way. John had done a little experimentation with some voices over in terms of the bulletin board reveal, but just there.
What we need to do is think back.
I'm sure you've heard many tall tales.
Bricks Marlin, this isn't right. I just want to
Tell
hear
me
every
every
last
It's
detail.
all there, and I'm telling it straight, I swear.
Something was wrong. It just didn't play. It didn't resolve right. It didn't. The punch that Chris had written so beautifully just wasn't. It wasn't coming. It was too much information, and it wasn't. It didn't. It lacked a voice. And I went to sleep in a sleeping bag next to the editing machine because it was where the air conditioning was. We had sectioned off a space to save money for John's house and power by having the air conditioning encased in with the editing, where the moviola was. So I've slept next to it in the air conditioning, and I remember waking up at 8 in the morning with John peeking his head out. We thought we'd finished the film 2 weeks early. We were all proud of this fact. And I looked up at John from the sleeping bag, and he's looking down at me through the plastic, and he says, "Are you up? Can I get back to work?" And I said, "We need 2 more weeks. We need those weeks. You need to go back into the film, and you need You need to go back into the film, and you need to get all the information you can that's going to convince the audience that Gabriel Byrne is the crook.
Keaton was Kaiser Soze.
No.
The kind of man who could wrangle the wills of men like Hackney and McManus. The kind of man who could engineer a police lineup through all these years of contacts in NYPD. The kind of man who could have killed Edie Finneran.
And then you got to go back in and find the same stuff for Spacey, and we got to just assemble it all.
It was the most disastrous sequence of the film, and it was really depressing for us because we had built up this one moment, and then I decided to cut the hell out of it, make a montage, but something still wasn't working, and that's because I didn't do any voices. And when you're on mag film, I don't know if most people, I don't know if on a flatbed you have your reel-to-reels going, and I had to build 3 tracks of overlapping dialogue, but I could only hear 2 at the same time. When I put on the third one, it was really against one of the others. And so I had to remember in my head exactly where this dialogue was coming in and out. But that montage, which people normally don't realize the editor is doing most often, is just as much of an accomplishment as the visual montage. The audio montage was extremely difficult and time-consuming, and also at the same time to have it somehow relate to the images in some weird way. And that's when the sequence started working.
And that's what kind of became that wonderful cacophony of images and voices, and it really worked beautifully.
How brilliant is it that the character of Verbal Kint, in the end, what's depicted in the film is that, was it all completely within his imagination, or is he Kaiser Soze?
Is it Spacey? Probably is. I love the idea that it probably, that it might not be.
I think that the genius of Bryan Singer and Chris McQuarrie was that they had reinvented that idea. Instead of giving you all these clues, what they did was they gave you a bunch of bullshit and led you in so many different directions, and were still able at the end to bring it back to some kind of a thought that made you understand maybe what had happened. Maybe. And that's the magic of The Usual Suspects for me, was that nothing is ever clearly defined.
My opinion is that that guy is Kaiser Soze, primarily because there's a fax. There's an image and a fax that was transmitted from a sketch artist's impressions in the hospital. So I think that that guy is Kaiser Soze. Now, who is Kaiser Soze really? Well, you know, he's obviously a guy who's interested in perpetuating his own myth, but is that myth true?
Bryan successfully, I think, managed to make a number of people believe that it could be them, including myself. So depending on, as I say, on your point of view and the angle from which you view it, you know, maybe there's just a Kaiser Soze in all of us.
And like that,